When it comes to maintenance, this is the part where gardeners get frustrated because if the plant is not properly maintained, it will start to have problems. Anytime a plant is stressed, it sacrifices its production of food or worse, starts getting pests and diseases. They know when your plant is stressed. I'm Dr. Denise DeBusk, and then in this video, I'll discuss tips on fertilization, watering, pruning, and pollination. I'll also talk about the best part of gardening, harvesting. Let's start with fertilization. Depending on the soil you used, you will most likely need to add fertilizer to it. If you want to be completely organic, you can have compost be your fertilizer like in Mel's Mix, or you can add an organic fertilizer. Some common ones are Job's Organic, Garden Tone, and Dr. Earth. Organic fertilizers release the nutrients slower because they have to be converted by microbes into a form that the plant will absorb. They also tend to be lower in nutrients, so you have to add a lot more than synthetic fertilizers. You can mix organic fertilizer into the soil before you plant. The label will tell you how often to apply it, but normally it is every 2 to 4 weeks. There are also granule synthetic quick release fertilizers such as 10-10-10. These need to be applied more carefully since they can burn the plant. Apply them 2 to 3 weeks after you have planted to give your plant a chance to adjust. Then circle the plant with fertilizer, avoiding the leaves and stem. For granule and slow release fertilizers, water after you fertilize. Any fertilizer I get on the leaves, like in the photo, I tap off before I water them. For liquids, you would apply them weekly to the plant. There are organic liquid fertilizers such as Fox Farm and Fish Emulsion, and inorganic ones such as Miracle-Gro. These are normally applied weekly. Lastly, there are slow release fertilizers like Osmocote. These will typically last 3 months or more, but with heavy feeders, you may need to provide additional fertilizer during the season. A common organic strategy is to sprinkle an organic fertilizer before or after planting and add a water-soluble fertilizer weekly. Make sure you follow the label for any fertilizer you use. Heavy feeders in gardening refer to plants that require a significant amount of nutrients, especially nitrogen, to grow well and produce well. This is because they are large plants or they produce fruit that requires a bunch of nutrients. These plants can quickly deplete the soil of nutrients and may need additional fertilization to thrive. Here are some common vegetables that are considered heavy feeders: tomatoes, corn, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, peppers, squash, cucumber, eggplants, melons, sweet potatoes, artichokes, and asparagus. Granted, some of these are not the best for containers, but I wanted to make sure you got all of them. If you have a nutrient problem, your plant will tell you in the way of symptoms. In the top photo, several of the leaves in this basil were showing tip burn. This was in a hydroponic garden that was inside. I realized that salts from the fertilizer were concentrating in the container, so I emptied the container and rinsed it out. In my strawberries, I sprinkled synthetic fertilizer when I saw that my strawberries needed a boost, and I overapplied. A day or two later, my strawberry leaves were wilting and the edges were burned. Since they were in soil, I applied a lot of water to rinse out the fertilizer. For nutrient deficiency, you may see the younger or lower leaves may yellow, as in this example of nitrogen and magnesium nutrient deficiency on celery on the right. A common solution for adding magnesium is to mix 2 tablespoons of Epsom salt in a gallon of water and water your plants with it monthly. Your leaves may purple like this tomato in the center. The veins of the older leaves are purpling, sometimes the leaves do as well. This is phosphorus deficiency, which is more common in container plants than plants in the ground. For that, you would add fertilizer. I added a quick release fertilizer to add phosphorus quickly. Spraying something like Miracle-Gro also works. The left photo is probably what I hear the most about. Blossom end rot is when the bottom of a tomato fruit blackens. This is due to a calcium deficiency, but you may have sufficient calcium in your soil. If you let the plant dry out, then water heavily, then let it dry out again, it will cause a blossom end rot. So the recommendation is to make sure the plant stays moist. I use self-watering buckets for my tomatoes so they always have even watering. If you have a true calcium deficiency, you can add 2 to 3 dry powdered eggshells, meaning grind them up fine, or 2 tablespoons of garden lime. The frequency of watering your container vegetable garden will depend on the type of plant and its stage of growth, container size, and climate. A larger container will hold more water than a small container, so it may not need to be watered as often. The material the container is made from also matters. For example, terracotta containers may need to be watered more often. If you have a seedling, it will not need as much water. If you have a full-grown fruiting plant like tomatoes or root vegetables like potatoes or onions, it will need more water. However, a general rule of thumb is to water when the top inch of soil feels dry. The temperature, the amount of sun the container gets, and the amount of humidity also affect how quickly the water evaporates and is used by the plant. It's best to water deeply and less frequently than shallowly and frequently. You should have left some room at the top of your container to allow the water to well up and soak in. Some ways you can tell that your container is dry is you can do the finger test and stick your finger in and see if any soil sticks to it. You can also lift or tip the pot and test the weight. You'll get used to what a dry pot and a moist pot feels like. The pot in the photo has a reservoir that I pour water into to keep the soil evenly moist. Watering is the #1 reason for why gardeners fail to have a good harvest. If you have an actively fruiting plant in a smaller container, don't wait to water for when they get bone dry. That will keep the plant in high stress mode and will lead to nutritional deficiencies. Learn your plant needs by checking them daily and make note of how long it takes for the top inch of soil to dry. Here are some tips to make watering easier so your life isn't consumed with caring for your plants. Keep the potting soil from drying out by mulching with straw, leaves, or a similar material. My favorite is Spanish moss since we have plenty of it in Florida where I am. Water every few days to keep your plants healthy, daily and sometimes even twice a day. Make watering your vegetable container garden easier by installing a micro irrigation system. They even have them for hanging pots. It can automatically irrigate your vegetables for you. You can also get self-watering containers or planters. Most work by having a small reservoir at the bottom to hold water, so you don't have to water so often. Some have indicators to tell you when the water is low. I build Berkey buckets, which I'll go into more depth in another video. You can also purchase these small moisture meters that can be kept in the pot to let you know when the pot needs watering. When the indicator is blue, it is moist. When it is white, it is dry. Here are some signs to look for if your plants are over or underwatered. If your plant is overwatered, the new and old leaves may fall off at the same time. It may be wilting due to lack of oxygen to the roots and may be stinky, like rotting. The leaves may become yellow or brown with the leaf tips dying. The roots may be gray and slimy. Depending on when you discover that it has been overwatered, you may or may not be able to recover the plant. Pour out any extra water and let the plant begin to dry out. Some plants like beans, peas, thyme, and oregano like to dry out more between waterings. Often, overwatering occurs when your plant doesn't have drainage holes or it is sitting on a plate that not allowing it to drain. Signs of underwatering include droopy or folded leaves and wilting. Leaves may become crispy or have brown tips. Its growth may be stunted. Leaves will yellow and eventually brown. The soil will be dry. If the leaves are crispy, the plant may not recover or it will lose those leaves. When it comes to underwatering, there is a point of no return where it has so little water that it dies. You want to water your plants before they start to wilt significantly. If that is happening on a regular basis, I recommend using a strategy on the previous slide. If you are growing your plants in an enclosed area like a patio or balcony, you may run into the problem of lacking pollinators. Certain plants, such as squash, cucumbers, and melons, need to have pollination from insects to bring pollen from a male flower to a female flower. Other plants like tomatoes, peppers, strawberries, and eggplants are self-pollinating with both parts on the same flower, so a breeze can knock the pollen onto the female part, although insect buzzing helps with pollination. If your plants are outside, you can plant pollinator plants to encourage them to come to your plants. If you are inside, you will need to do it manually. On the slide is a male and female squash flower. Keep in mind that the first flowers that are produced will be all male flowers. These flowers have skinny stems and a single part in the center of the flower. You can actually cook with the flowers so they don't go to waste. You will eventually get female flowers. They have thicker stems and multiple parts in the center of the flower. You can use a small brush or a cotton swab to transfer the pollen from the male part to the female part. For self-pollinating plants that may lack a strong breeze to help pollinate them, I've used an electric toothbrush to buzz the flowers and release the pollen, or I've tapped the flowers. It significantly increased my tomato production on my enclosed porch. This is the result of poor pollination. In strawberries, the fruit will be deformed. Each seed is the result of pollination. So if only some of the parts were pollinated, but others not, then those parts won't grow. For squash, an unpollinated fruit will begin to grow, but then rot and fall off. There are a variety of pollinator plants that you can add to your garden to help with pollination. Many of these serve a double purpose and can help repel pests or attract beneficial organisms. Herbs include mint, bee balm, chives, oregano, borage, and lavender. Ornamental flowers include sunflowers, zinnias, marigolds, sedums, nasturtium, cosmos, butterfly weed, asters, black-eyed Susan, and snapdragons. Adding a few of these in your garden can help bring in the bees. Let's move on to pruning. Pruning is not a common practice for most vegetables, as they are typically grown for their edible fruits, leaves, or roots. For all plants, remove any leaves that are dead or yellowing. However, there are some vegetable plants that can benefit from pruning to encourage better growth, higher yields, and overall health. Here are a few examples. Indeterminate tomato varieties, which continue to grow and produce fruit throughout the growing season, can benefit from pruning. By removing the suckers, the shoots that emerge in the leaf axils, you can direct more energy towards fruit production and better airflow, reducing the risk of diseases. Similar to tomatoes, pepper plants can be pruned to remove excessive growth and improve airflow. Pruning can lead to larger, healthier peppers. You may also want to remove the early flowers on your pepper if your plant is still small to direct its energy to developing sturdy branches. Some cucumber varieties can be pruned to remove excessive vines that may hinder fruit development or make harvesting more difficult. By focusing on the plant's energy on fewer vines, you may get larger and more flavorful cucumbers. Pruning can help improve the size and shape of eggplants by removing some of the excessive foliage that can overshadow the fruits. Squash and zucchini can also benefit from limited pruning to remove excessive lower growth and promote better airflow around the leaves and fruits. Now the fun part, harvesting. Here are some tips for harvesting vegetables in containers. Check the plant tag or seed packet to determine the estimated time for maturity. Once the vegetables reach maturity, they are ready for harvesting. Harvesting in the morning when temperatures are cooler will help preserve the quality of the vegetables. If you wait until later in the day, the heat may cause the vegetables to wilt and spoil more quickly. Use sharp scissors or pruning shears to harvest the vegetables to avoid damaging the plant or other nearby vegetables. Harvest vegetables frequently as they can become overripe and lose their flavor and nutrients. Regular harvesting can also encourage the plant to continue producing. Handle vegetables with care to avoid bruising or damaging them. Place them in a basket or container lined with a soft cloth. Store the vegetables in a cool, dry place away from direct sunlight. Some vegetables may need to be stored in a refrigerator to maintain freshness. By following these tips, you can successfully harvest vegetables from your container garden and enjoy fresh, delicious produce all season long. There was a lot packed into this video. Refer to the checklist for setup and maintenance as reminders of what you need to do. In this video, I discussed the types of fertilizers and how you need to make a schedule of when to fertilize depending on which type you use. I also mentioned strategies for watering so that your plants remain stress-free. I emphasize the importance of pollinators, especially when it comes to plants like squash and cucumbers, and if you lack them, you may need to help them out. For plants like tomatoes, pruning suckers may become part of your routine. Other plants benefit from light pruning as well. Lastly, harvest in the morning, harvest frequently, and treat your harvest with care.